one of my closest friends, you know, he took his own life in 2009. There was something about him that I could tell he just didn't love life that much. It had a massive impact on me. Like, even beforehand, didn't even really. When you'd say the word suicide, it wouldn't trigger anything in me before.
What needs to change? Like, within, like, how do we start to fix this problem?
I don't know, is the honest answer. You know, I guess if we could get into people younger and just tell them how special they are and surround them with love and make them realise how wanted they are and how needed they are, and actually how profound the impact would be on anyone else if they weren't there.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. We're sharing the stories of our guests. I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant. It's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events, enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Delighted to be welcomed by my good friend, Mr. Jon Kennett. How are you, John?
I'm all right, mate. You?
Mate, buzzing.
The red lights are on.
The red lights are on. We are winning.
We're ready to go.
Mate, so delighted to have you on. It's been great getting to know you over the last, I guess, year or so, and become really, I'd like to say, really good friends. And we've had many great conversations, you know, over a coffee and a beer, and delighted to be able to share this, hopefully, in your story and where that goes. So look, we're going to jump straight in as we always do, right?
Yeah.
Success.
Yeah. How
do you define it? What does it mean to you?
I've been thinking about this in preparation for having a chat with you, because I knew that would probably be the first thing you ask. It changes, I think, for a lot of people. For me, definitely it changes, and it's changed a lot since before I had kids, probably. Success to me back in the day when I was a younger man was very much around material things, right? Which I think everyone's probably is at one point left before they start getting deep in their mind and thinking about other things in life. But yeah, definitely had a material angle to it. Big house, nice cars, whatever else it might look like. And it's changed definitely since I had kids. And my success now feels like and looks like, how they end up turning out, for sure. Like, if they turn out to be nice boys and they thrive and they have a great life, then I think that would be definitely a mark of success. But then, going back to me personally, I was trying to be realistic about this when I was thinking about it. Like, there's an element of me that wants to be, noble, and it's about, enjoyment. It's about all these things and being healthy and happy. But there's definitely still a material angle in it as well. Like, I definitely see success at some point in my life. I'd love to be mortgage free, and I'd love to be, having some nice things in my life, making that quality of life jump up a few notches, for sure. But also being healthy, being happy, and being fit, and being well, and having good people around, and those sorts of things. Feeling like, I don't want to say I've made it, but there's an element of I've made it, and that sort of level of that is, I think, a mixture of all of those things. I don't think there's like one particular thing. I think it's a mixture of, not having to worry too much about the financial stresses of life, but also being very happy and content with my family life and with my my friendship groups and all of those things as well. So I think crosses a few different areas, but I think those are all important core bits of me. And I don't want to lie and say it's not a material thing, because it definitely is still. There's definitely my ego's going, go on, you want to notch up a few rungs of that ladder. But yeah, I think it's it's bigger than just that. It's a lot of things all in one.
It's like, one of the things I think I've learned from doing the podcast and I guess my own journey is like, and especially I think it was Joe Baldwin I spoke to about this, and she's talking about there is that element of striving for that bigger house and that that bigger car. But what she asked, which was really interesting, is what is that feeling you think that's going to give you, like when you have got to that stage. Let's say, for example, you go, that day I'm mortgage free. What's that feeling that you're looking for or you think that you're going to get to?
I think is it for me, the way I'd associate that is with peace of mind and a bit more freedom. Freedom to not have to work as hard, perhaps, and enjoy other things in life that that you perhaps can't afford to do if you're not potentially a little bit more financially relaxed. Take some of the pressure and the burden off. I think it's just alleviating a little bit of that stress, I think, to be financially comfortable.
Yeah, I get it. Look, I've built a whole business around reframing success based on the fact of where it's not about this and it's about this, maybe, but and I'm lying if I said that, because obviously the things I'm still trying to grow businesses.
Course,
why am I growing businesses? Actually, there is a caveat to it that obviously I've really got a purpose with our mission to reframe it for a reduced suicide rate, etc., etc. So I've got a real purpose behind it, but hopefully that money will become a byproduct, because you're right, like the stresses and pressures that I struggle with and what keeps me up at night often is the lack of money.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
Because I've described it a couple of times around when you come from a place of scarcity, you think differently, right? When you come from a place of abundance, you think differently. You go into a meeting, you go into any engagement, any conversation with a different mindset, because you're coming from a place that. So there's a part of me that goes, I want to generate more financial stability, because if I come from a place of abundance, I think clearer, and I can be more productive, and actually then I can have more of an impact, and it leads into my purpose. So I do caveat so much of the stuff I think what I preach or talk about or whatever, with the fact that I do think money is really important. Yeah. And I do. But there is the element for me of going, it's just the question, I guess, to see where you go. Because I had a friend who very recently paid off his mortgage. He's a bit younger than me. He's a couple of years younger than me.
Shout out to your friend.
Yeah, he's done very well, and I'm really proud of him. But he's grafted really hard. Yeah, he has grafted really hard. Got his own company, grafted really hard. And he said, like, that feeling I thought that I would get when I paid off that mortgage lasted for about 30 seconds. And you go, because back to the thing you mentioned about, I feel like I've made it, maybe, because society tells us that would be a measure of us making it, right? Yeah. Come on, I paid my mortgage off, I'm mortgage free, made it. Yeah. But do we? I guess the question is, do we? When do you get to that feeling when you go, I've done it, that's it?
I suppose you only know when you get there.
And is that the thing? But I guess to get there, what is sacrifice to get there?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And you go, I guess the cliches, and this podcast does become a lot of cliches, but they're cliches because they're cliches. I think because some of them are true, right? Yeah, like it's the journey and not the destination. Like if that feeling I want of feeling like I've made it, as you mentioned, how can I create things in my daily life that bring me that feeling? Where are you on that? Like you said, getting up every day and doing a job maybe that you love, or working within an environment, doing something with purpose, or them things. Can we get that feeling on that journey? What?
I'm sure you could, because there's probably macro levels of success, right? And you've got to work mindfully and diligently, I think, to identify what those things are. as you go on that journey. I'd imagine like those little macro wins that you'll get throughout a day, you've got to celebrate them. And you talked about journaling and things like that, you start to really reflect on those little successes throughout the course of your day and your week and your month and your year and so on. And, hopefully you can get a feeling of success. I mean, I get a feeling of success quite regularly, whether I win a project that I really wanted, I feel success from that, or whether if something amazing happens at school, the kid's school or something, and I feel good about that. There's loads of little successes, I think. And then there's this sort of big overarching piece where, because I think you probably, where do you define the point in which success is now achieved as well? Because is it something you could say now, or is it something you have to say when you're looking back at your life, when you're maybe an older gent or an older lady, and saying, okay, now I feel successful because here's all the things that I've kind of achieved in my life.
And is
at what point do you measure success as well? It's like not how you measure it, but like at what point in your life do you measure success? I think is quite an interesting point, because I think it's going to change all the way through life, isn't it?
Yeah. I agree, and I guess I'm wondering again, like that feeling of feeling successful.
Yeah.
Like when we, what am I trying to say? Where that can we? Like you said, at what point is it about achievement?
Yeah.
Is it about achievement? Because actually, if what equals success is achievement, means we're always going to set a goal, and when I get to that, but I guess the point I'm trying to make, and what I think I've found from speaking to people like Olympic champions who stood on an Olympic podium and got a gold medal, or World Cup winners, or multi-millionaires who've sold that business and made that money, and be the feeling that you're talking about, like Kevin Byrne, 90 million sold Checker Trade for, and yet there wasn't that feeling of success necessarily by the metrics of society and how we would deem someone to have made it. He's done it, and he started a business from nothing.
Yeah, you would typically define that as successful, right?
But he sat opposite me, and when I signed them papers, and as much as that money's changed my life, I wish I still had what I had. Like, so you go, because his actual feeling of success would have been him. He talked about it with so much passion, going, I'm sticking these post-its on the door. I'm going to go national. I'm going to go national. Yeah. And then when he went national, like that feeling of success, that wasn't necessarily based on a financial thing. It was the feeling that he got from doing it. So I guess, is it that we can change the narrative around success being an achievement or a goal, as opposed to a feeling that we can get from those bits you mentioned about the micro?
Yeah.
Well,
it's all sort of validation as well. That's another part of it, isn't it? It's like how you self-validate and how others validate you as well. I think a lot of people would suggest is how they measure success.
It's on other people's
perception, society's perception, like you say, and then maybe it's their own because of that environment that they've been around, or from the the people they've been to school with, who they've seen then go off and do amazing things, or maybe haven't done amazing things. And then there's measuring yourself against other people that you perhaps feel more successful versus, or maybe don't feel as successful as. There's this is probably a huge thing to unpick. It's just like, because I don't know if you ever, potentially, I don't know if you ever feel successful. Because I think the way in which you look at your life will change so often as you get older, and as different things happen around you, and you might feel a level of success. Let's say you sell your business or something and you make 90 million quid. You might feel success for that, and it might go away quite quickly. And then you might be looking for something else to help you feel successful. Maybe it's just the human condition to always want to feel or aspire to do something else or something next, that they then feel that sense of achievement or winning or being successful. Because I would imagine if you've got 90 million quid in the bank, your levels of success are going to change dramatically. It might be you will become a philanthropist or something, and suddenly what success looks like to you is, whatever the cause is you're supporting, making that successful, making other people thrive and have a better quality of life or whatever. So I think it just will change depending on whatever your focus is or your goals are at that time. Like, let's say your goal right now, or mine, let's say my goal was easier. Let's say it's making sure the kids have a happy life and they thrive, hopefully earn a decent enough crust to make life a little bit nicer, go on nice holidays, to do all those, build those memories, sit down, have a glass of wine or whatever with the wife, and, enjoy that experience, that might feel successful at that period of time. But, you know, then the kids are going to get older, they're going to grow up, they're going to move out, they're going to do over that. We might be looking at success very differently at that point, you know. Might be the next step is, oh, now we live abroad in a nice villa somewhere, you know, that could be we've made it, now we're at this bit, but then it might change again, you know. So I think it's always just going to, I mean, I'm focusing more on the materials, I guess, there again, but there's an element that I think will just evolve around you and the lifestyle that you're in and the life you're leading, probably.
I think what I take from that and what really aligns with like, what come out of the 100th episode was this collective definition of success through all the people I'd spoke to, and exactly what you've just highlighted. The opening part was the ongoing pursuit of success.
Yeah.
It's the ongoing pursuit, right? And so, does it ever stop? Like, when do you ever get to? I think that's it. I think we've been sold this. I think we've been sold almost a lie from society to go, do this, and this, and when you get to this, you'd have made it, and that's when you can go, okay, I'm done. But we're never really done.
No, of course not.
Because actually, what Kevin Byrne highlighted, Chris Goodman, even people like that, and Sally Gunn, whoever's been on, who have achieved what society would deem as the ultimate success, have all said that actually what we need, what we crave, what we desire within being a human being is purpose.
Yeah.
And we need something. We need a purpose, whatever that looks like. And money can feel, or that financial security and gain can feel a certain element and a hole there, but it won't.
Well, it isn't going to solve all your problems, that's for sure. And I've, you know, like you, I've been around and known plenty of people who have made a lot of money.
Yeah.
It ain't made them happier. It's made them happy for a bit, and it's made those moments of happiness really extreme, you know, being able to do these bonkers things that in life are out of reach for the regular, for the rest of us, you know, that's the truth. And, you know, they can make you very happy, and they can give you a lot of good vibes, and they can do all of those things that I think are, by, you know, society standards, probably amazing and like what everyone's aspiring to. But also I've seen it, you know, where they've then been impacted by horrible things that go on in their lives, and suddenly they're just regular people that still have exactly the same wants and needs and hopes as the rest of us, except they've got a little bit less stress in the financial side of it, you know. But it doesn't mean that the rest of life stresses, you know, that doesn't mean their family aren't going to get poorly sometimes, or that, you know, they're going to lose friends, or you know, all the things that we're all going to experience as humans is going to happen to us whether we've got billions in the bank or not, you know. Yes, we can make some of those problems go away a bit easier probably, but you know, at the end of the day, we're, you know, unless you're completely insane, I think you're going to have, you know, you're going to struggle to reach whatever you might consider as the society's level of success, and then not still want to achieve something, which is why most people that you will find that have made it financially and become very comfortable in that world often go on to do, it's when they become more spiritual, it's often when they become more like philanthropists, it's more when they start giving back, because they've achieved something and actually have quite quickly realised it's not the be all and end all. And then that's when they go, you know, I know someone very, you know, he made a lot of money, had a horrific experience abroad, completely changed him as a person, you know, like from being, you know, quite pent up and quite sort of agitated and angry and, you know, to being like very much the opposite of that, and much more connected and much more mindful and, you know, and much more about giving back and being, you know, just more of a down-to-earth human being, I guess, really. You know, I think it's always going to change, isn't it?
And I wonder whether I spoke to, so me and Rob Starr was talking about this, and he said to me, like, he said, I really loved your 100th episode, but he said, is it that when does this feeling? So everyone I speak to generally have potentially my sort of generation, right? So similar ages, maybe a little bit older, a little bit younger, whatever, but similar generations. So we get to is it that we have to have a different view of success in our 20s to give us the drive to get to a point where we go, now I'm reflecting. Like, I'm 46 and I'm reflecting. I'm looking at things in a different way, right? So, but did I need to go through all of this shit and all of the other stuff to get to this point to look back? When can we? What does it look like if we changed it for kids or the next generation to view it slightly differently? What would that outcome look like?
We're in a very fortunate position as well, right? in reality. You and I sitting here doing this and getting up every day and not having to worry about whether we're going to be able to get a drink of water or have success to us is going to be completely skewed compared to someone that might have to worry about where the next meal is literally going to come from or where the next glass of water is going to come from, like just getting out of bed or surviving the night. Or, you know, those things, like success might look incredibly different for someone else like that, you know. They might dream of things that, you know, that we already take for granted every day. So I think it's always going to be completely individual and always dependent on the scenario and the environment and the way they've been brought up and where they're born. And, you know, all of those things are going to be quite, I think, instrumental in dictating, I guess, what success might look like. And I think it's...
Yeah, that's special. You're right. It is based on our circumstances, isn't it, and where we are. And we recognise, I guess, like you said, the privilege that we've got to be in the position that we are and to not have to worry. And like you said, and yet we still talk about money worries and them things and the things that we were... again, I use Rob as an example, but he used that brilliant Mark Twain quote, which I will probably mess up, but something along the lines of, I'm an old man who has spent my life worrying about the majority of things that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And we spend so much of our time worrying, this and that, if that's going to come in, am I going to be able to pay that, and what's that going to do? And you can consider, and actually... none of them things happen, and you survive. You find a way. We're okay. We're still here,
you're either worrying about something you've done in the past, not as well, and wish you'd done better, and then you dwell on it, or you're worrying about stuff that hasn't happened yet. Yeah, it's very hard to stay present. I find it really difficult to stay in the moment and present. We were talking a little bit about breath work and stuff, and that ability to remain in the moment and stay focused on where you are now and not worry. Because those things are the things that those things keep me up. You know, when I'm just like worrying about something that theoretically may or may not happen in the future, or you know, maybe I should have gone down this path when I was younger and instead I would have been doing it, you know, all of those things. And I think it's not particularly conducive. I'm sure it's not that healthy. But I mean, if anyone can crack the actual code of being smack bang where they are right now at any minute of any given day, that would be a pretty magical superpower.
You're so right. Look, what come out, one of the 5 pillars is presence, right? One of what I've learned, and there's so much, and it's probably similar to you. And I know we've probably spoke about this offline a few times. Like, it's probably the thing I struggle with the most, right? To be present, because you constantly, again, society.
We're high achievers, mate.
Yeah, well, that's it. We're constantly living, but you're constantly living in the future. Right? You're constantly going, I'm planning for this. We're planning for this. We've got a goal. We're planning. You know what I mean? We're constantly striving for these things. And you do, like you said, we get to a certain age, maybe, where we reflect. So you're looking back constantly, but you can't change that. So then, I've started to listen. Hence why I'm probably dressed a little bit more like a monk today. Do you know what I mean? I'm going down.
It's
that.
A good look
That's
for
a
you.
good look. I'm going with this. I've got the hairstyle for it, so I'm winning, mate. But you go like, there's elements of them that have cracked it in that sense, because they do talk so much about that and that level of being present in that moment, because now really is all there is. And no matter how many times I regurgitate that, or I see it on another post, or I see the thing, now is all there is. Hopefully not, but we could get up and not get up tomorrow, right? And yesterday's already gone, and I can't change that. All I can do is live right here, right now, and probably, I've mentioned this a few times, the reason I love this so much is it forces me to do this. It forces me to look at you and really listen to you and be in the moment, not thinking about, I've got that fucking email I've got to send later, or I've got that next meeting, because I'll miss the conversation. It forces, and that probably the reason, this is the place where I'm the most present I can be. And probably why I love it so much, and I thrive, and it's the thing that's given me purpose, because it forces me to really listen and really be in that moment, and I'm not thinking about other stuff, and I'm trying to work out a way, because this is a whole fucking journey for me, but it's cathartic, that's why I do it as well. It's me learning from people like you. So I go, how do I take this one going here into the daily life, the daily grind, and not let that noise from society or my own narrative just mess up. I mean, how do you say you struggle with that, with presence? What? What?
Well, I'm a bit of a drifter.
But
I mean, I definitely do. Like, I'm trying to think of instances that don't incriminate me, not in a bad way, just in like getting in trouble for my wife kind of way. But yeah, no, there's definitely times when my brain wanders. You know, I'll be having a chat with someone, less so at the moment actually. I don't know why. The last few weeks I've definitely been a bit more kind of present in conversations, but and I don't know whether this is a chemical thing or this is, you know, there's something that goes on in the brain and changes. I don't know, but you know, if I'll be having a conversation with someone and I can feel my mind start to wander, and I'm really trying to stay present in the conversation, and that act of trying to stay present in the conversation makes my brain wander even more. So now I'm spiraling down this, I really want to listen to you, but now I'm only listening to myself trying to listen to you. And I've got this internal dialogue going, come on, concentrate, look them in the eye, you'll learn, you know, and I'm like, what am I doing? And that's a really weird battle in itself. That's that internal dialogue going, yeah, but you know, you've got to do really hard work here to you know, get something out of this conversation in terms of value, you know, try and understand, try and remember what that person said, you know, and try and say something useful back, you know, that break down that conversation in your mind into actually, you know, the fundamentals of what having a chat with someone is, you know. I definitely feel like that's less of a challenge at the moment for whatever reason, but definitely you know, I've struggled with that all my life, you know, being really wanting to pay attention, but my brain's like either thinking about something else or wanting to, is working too hard to pay attention, so it stops paying attention. It's a really weird dialogue.
I wonder as well whether, like, again, how many people hear me talk about the education system on here every episode? I wonder what does it look like actually. Part of there's a lesson around teaching people to listen. Yeah, teach active listening, really listening.
Yes,
and would that encourage people to be in the moment more, maybe to have conversation? What is, like, what an amazing skill to be able to actually have a, like, me and you can, you know, we've met and we go and have a chat and we go and have a beer and you can just sit and chat to each other and we know how to have that. But it's the people that find that maybe difficult.
Really difficult. Loads of people I know find that incredibly challenging.
So what does it look like? Skills that we give kids is that one of them things? Like, what a brilliant skill to be able to give, but not only to be able to communicate and I'm going to tell you how I feel or what I'm thinking, and but for you to actually give you the skills to really listen. Yeah. What does that look like? I don't know if we've done it when you come on the away day that we done with Joel, and he does a couple of them things where you sit and talk to someone and you've got to share what you've learned about that person, right?
Yeah.
Like a great.
Well, it's a good exercise because you're really sitting there trying. But even then, I have to be honest, even that, I was finding that part of that, because it was kind of not a forced interaction in a negative sense, but it was an interaction that was, it was an activity, it was an exercise, right? So we've got to go and do that and be proactive about it. So I was really trying to focus and listen intently, and my inner dialogue's completely trying to screw that up for me. Like, no, you don't need to worry about this. Like, I wonder what we can have for lunch, you know, that whatever is going on. But I'm like, shut up. I really am actually interested to know this. And I'm also going to have to go back in a minute and explain what I've learned about this other person. But that whole thing, and I don't know whether it's like I don't know if it's a nature versus nurture thing. I do know that there are, when you're going back to your point about there's some people that maybe find those situations difficult, or maybe not able to have the, you know, be active or present in conversations, or maybe find those awkward. I mean, I think some people are just that way inclined. They have, you know, they're just not as naturally curious, I guess, or you know, not, maybe they're just a bit more subdued or introverted, perhaps. And there's people that are much more inclined to go out and chat with people and learn about them and get enriched by their lives, and you know, hopefully get some value from those interactions and whatnot. I think it's just people that are maybe one side or the other. And I was thinking about this, you were like, how could you ever teach this to people? And you probably could, but then are they going to be the ones that are caught up in their own heads trying to make sure that they're doing their listening techniques correctly while they're doing it? I was remembered reading a book about like body language, and then going into that whole thing about trying to understand human behavioural psychology and going down a bit of a rabbit hole with it many years ago. I haven't read anything for a long time, but I couldn't stop noticing things following that in terms of how people would be standing. And then I'm thinking, am I standing the right way? And then I'm like, oh, okay, you know, when you're talking to someone and you see they're you know, 1 foot pointed in the opposite direction of where you guys are chatting, you know, knowing that that's a cue for someone that doesn't really want to talk to you. They're just being polite, you know, they want to get away rather than standing square on with you, feet facing you, etc., etc. So there's loads of these little things, but you suddenly start noticing these things, and now you're in a world where you're trying to understand or trying to unpick whether someone's being authentic with you if they're standing in front of you. And so, you know, now I'm distracted from the conversation because I'm checking whether your feet are pointed in the wrong direction or towards the door or something. You know, and you start becoming really anal about like these sort of human interactions. I'm not sure how healthy that is either. Like sometimes ignorance is bliss. Like I might actually rather not know.
And again, it's back to that feeling of like, how can you be in the moment and just appreciate it if you are
constantly analysing, if you're not listening well enough, or you're watching to see if they're actually interested because of the way that they may be pointing in a different direction, or they're looking away a couple of times, or they're, you know, what you're not listening now. You're now suddenly doing a human behavioural appraisal and grading them in your mind of like intent.
You're not even, and then you're pulling them up on you and going, actually, you're sitting, you don't even want to be in this conversation. Go away.
You haven't heard a single word they've said. You've literally heard nothing. You've been too busy in your own exercise. And that's where I think those behaviours can become a bit unhealthy, unless of course they become automatic.
That takes training, I guess.
It takes a bit of training, yeah.
Well, but I guess one of the things I take from what you said as well, the word that you used that I think is really important, and again, something I encourage the kids to be, is curious, right?
Yeah.
Curiosity is such a, I think if you are naturally a curious person, you will want to find out about people, and then that encourages those more active listening skills, because you really want to understand and you want to find out. And I think, like, if there's one thing I really want to drum into them kids, just constant. I always say to them, there's never a stupid question, right? Never. Just always ask a question. Never start with, this is a bit of a stupid question. Don't ever say that. Always just ask the question. If it's stupid, it won't ever be, because it's you're trying to get an understanding of something, and I think that's that's something in schools I think they need to encourage as much as possible. Right?
I was having this. It was a bonkers course. I lasted one session and I didn't go back, to be honest with you. But there was one nugget of value in it that I thought was useful. It was about this. They termed it as like an active listening, or a listening, which I think was a different way of wording, a different way of saying, like, you make up your mind about people based on looks and based on the first time you sort of see them, and your brain quite quickly decides whether this person is going to add any value to you or they're not. So you build this thing called a listening for them. So I might look at you and go, this guy looks all right. I bet he's quite funny to have a chat with. I'll go and have a chat with him, you know, and I might get some value out of that. Not like, you're going to give me something of value, but there might be something useful that comes from the conversation. And then there's other people that your brain will subconsciously decide aren't going to give you that. And you have a listening for them. You predetermined outcome that this conversation isn't going to be productive, and we all do it. You know, you'll walk down the street and you'll be like, I wouldn't talk to that person. I wouldn't talk to that person. Whether you're actively thinking that or not is a different thing. But there are, almost in all walks of life, there are people that you will see that you don't think are going to be your people. So it's unlikely you're going to talk to them, or that you're not going to get on, or you're not going to know what to say. And it might be a nice reason, it might be a not so nice reason, but there are always going to be those instances. And this context was about not having those predetermined listenings, as it were, those predetermined thoughts and contexts about what a person may or may not be like. Is actually being open to those conversations, regardless of who, how, what, where, why, or whatever, because there's likely going to be something in there, if you're really listening, that's going to be interesting or of value. And if there isn't, no, you know, that's also fine. But more often than not, if you ask the right questions, or you probe in the right ways, or there's going to be something in that conversation that is something you haven't heard, or that maybe is something different. And you know, especially in like the networking content, a lot of what we do as well, you know, where you're meeting people all the time. Once you can get past the business facades and get past the, I'm this person that does this at this place, you know, you start getting on with people on a more human level, you get an enormous amount of value out of those conversations. You start hearing some amazing things and learning some great things. So I think one of the key bits for me in that since I did that, was actually working much harder to not have a premeditated opinion or a listening for people, and trying to be open and curious, you know, regardless of who, what walks of life or whatever, because there's something interesting to learn. Whether you can apply it to your daily life, or it's going to enhance your work life, maybe not, but is it going to make you more knowledgeable about a topic, or are you going to be more aware about something you weren't perhaps aware of before, you know?
Yeah.
It's quite interesting.
That's so fascinating. And it's, I'm listening to that, and advice you would give to people, I guess, because just touching on the networking scene, and a lot of business owners may be listening, and like we spoke offline, you said like how effective it's been for you networking the last year or so, and the benefits of that. And I mentioned, I think that obviously one of the key things to that is you as an individual, right? People are bought into you, but that's true, right? People buy from people. Right? I think it's part of our manifesto of county business clubs. People buy from people. Like, no matter, I think, 15 years in different businesses, it doesn't matter what business I've done. People buy into you as an individual, and I think that's where it's really key. But you mentioned there a little bit about the networking thing. What advice would you give to someone listening about going out into? I'm going into the networking scene. What would you?
Don't sell them anything. That's the first thing. Yeah. Don't leave your business card on the table. Certainly not straight away, anyway. Don't pitch. Go and make friends. Go and hang out. Genuinely be curious, and actually try and connect with people that you think are like-minded, and that you're going to get on, and be open to those interactions. Because I've met so many nice people actually out of networking. Like lots of people I'd consider friends now. And actually, funnily enough, they are the ones that I'm doing business with, whether it's I'm procuring services from them or they're introducing people to me, and that has become a byproduct. It's like friendship in any instance. If someone asks me, do I know a good plasterer? I've got a great friend who's a great plasterer. Yeah, I'm going to refer him because he's a friend of mine. I don't know if he's any good. He's probably all right, but I'm going to refer him. He's a pal of mine. Same with other people that I know that I've, lifelong friends that I introduce to people if they need something that I'm aware of that they need. Great. I know a guy that can do that, and I'd recommend them. And I think that's it's just that, but in a slightly different way. We're going to networking. I always say it's like going to a wedding and not knowing anyone, basically. You turn up and you're like, hi, I'm going to stand next to you awkwardly for a bit until you acknowledge me. I'm going to butt into your conversation. I'm going to try and get on whatever. I'm going to say something that's useful, maybe contribute to whatever you're talking about already. And then I'm going to, we're going to talk, we're going to introduce ourselves to each other. We're going to say what we do for a living. And then, that's your kind of first bit of networking, and it's very awkward at first. You do your first one or your first two, you're just like, what am I doing, and then by the next few, and you sort of start seeing more familiar faces and you start becoming more comfortable, and it's like doing anything, the more you do it, the more comfortable you are with it, so I think being, going and becoming familiar with those awkward scenarios at the very beginning, and then they're suddenly not awkward, they're suddenly quite good fun, and you build a great network of people around you that that you enjoy going to meet, and actually getting out and going out to meet someone like yourself or Lindsay or anyone, go and have those conversations. Great fun, always have a nice time. And actually, my life's been enriched massively by the process of networking. My confidence in those scenarios has gone through the roof, And actually, taking that into my personal life as well, there's so many scenarios now that I'm much more comfortable in, because of the fact I've been in so many rooms where I've not known a single person, and kind of had a good afternoon, and by the end of it left with lots of people that are now in my phone and that I'm on LinkedIn with now, and I'm having meaningful conversations with, and then eventually, there's been introductions, and there's been conversations about how I might be able to help them or vice versa, and that's been very meaningful, I think. So just be open to it. There's a lot of people that poo-poo networking, like, oh, it doesn't work. I think you've got to be open to it, definitely. You've got to be one of those people that's like, this is going to be quite good fun, and I'm going to go and get this a bit of an adventure, and I'm going to have something nice to eat, and I'm going, all of those things. But I think you've got to be prepared to put the time in as well. I think you've got to be consistent with it, and I think you've got to, you've got to make it work hard, but you've got to be authentic with it as well. I don't think you can go in and be, someone you're not. And I do see a lot of people that come in, and there's like a facade for quite a while before finally those sort of barriers break down a bit, which is better, I think, because you can have better conversations with people. But I think once you can get beyond that, that's when it really starts to become much more meaningful. And it took me a while I'd say probably a good couple of months before I was like, oh, do you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to go and have a nice time. And if something comes from it, great. And if it doesn't. And that's when it starts to become more fruitful.
That's such a brilliant bit of advice, I think. It's that because we're so fixated on outcomes. Right? There's a few times I'd gone to network event when I very first started out, and people would come up and they go, a salesperson would be there, and they're targeted, but I need to get something from today because my boss will.
Yeah.
But
what's the point of you being
yeah, exactly. And the boss's view on it would be, well, how many business cards have you got? Who did you speak to? For me, it's just the wrong way of looking. It's so they're fixated on the outcome, whereas like for me, it's purely based on relationship building. And like I always use a really good example where there was a guy who I remember sitting next to when I was just doing firm balls. So I'm doing five-a-side football leagues, and that's it. And I sat next to a guy who was in probably his early 60s, and I told him what I do, and he's obviously not going to probably put a team into a firm balls league.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Just purely on the basis he was like, oh, yeah. But I've become really good friends with him. We just chatted about family, we chatted about food and drink and all different types of things. And actually, over the years, I saw him at every networking event, and we become really good friends. He asked me how the kids were and stuff like that, and we just become good friends. When I then took over the magazine, he was one of the first people to go, oh, actually, my business, I'm going to need to advertise it now. I need to come and do it. And we actually become partners with us at county business clubs. And you know what I mean? And that, that's over an 8-year period. If I'm measuring it based on the fact of building a relationship and I've got X out, is that financially viable? Probably not. Yeah. When you look at how much you spent on networking to get to that, maybe one sale. Exactly. But how many people had he recommended to come and play in firm balls, and how many people because you'd built that relationship? And that's the key for me. Is purely if you view networking as all I'm doing is building relationships, not focus on the outcome, the outcome will happen, and you will get business from it.
And I think if you're going to make relationships for the wrong reasons, that's also when it's not conducive, right? So if you're like, networking's about building relationships, which we know, both of us know it is, but if you're then kind of forcing those relationships and they don't become meaningful, they're not authentic again, and suddenly they're not worth their weight in gold either. So I think it's just taking the pressure off it a little bit. You know, and I get when companies are sending business development managers or salespeople, or anyone there that's maybe not the head of the company, or that's someone that's not in a very senior position, because they probably feel like they're on a jolly and actually they should be working, and there's a bit of guilt there. I remember I used to feel a bit of guilt going to networking events at the beginning, because I'm like, well, I'm having a nice afternoon, having something nice to eat and a glass of wine or whatever, and the team are slogging their way, back in the office. And I remember Chris Mansfield said to me when I said that to him once, he said, look, this is work, this is work, this is what we do, and it's very much about the relationship side of it, and it's very much about connections and the people buying from people part that you spoke about a moment ago. It's very much about that. So there's no need for anyone to feel kind of a guilt or an uneasiness about going and doing these things, because they are fruitful. They do yield results longer term. And you are going to make meaningful connections and meet loads of good people as you do these things, and that's going to enrich your personal life, it's going to enrich your business life. So I think it's just taking the pressure off of the scenario that you're not going to go to an event. I mean, you might do. It might be. I mean, I've had a couple of lucky strikes where I've gone to an event and someone said, "Oh, actually," you have a call on a Monday and suddenly you're doing some business. But I think just taking the pressure off of it a little bit and the formality out of it a little bit, and just going and embracing the experience and having a nice time. And meeting some cool people and making some friends along the way. That personally, that feels like a good thing to do as well. You get really good, you get a good feeling from that. Your confidence increases from that sort of thing. Plus, from what I've experienced as well, as I said, probably 18 months along that journey, is that it's yielded a massive return. It's been very fruitful in that regard. Amazing. And continues to be our biggest source of lead gen in the business, versus completely switched from where it was like largely inbound and driven by those things. Now it's largely referrals, partnerships, and networking opportunities that are bringing business to us, or certainly interest to what we do. And long may that continue.
I think it's really good advice. I think it's such a built business is based on the back of that, and I think it's such an important skill. But I wonder. Well, take me back to John, a younger John, growing up. What do I need to know about life growing up that shaped who you are today? As that skill set that you've got to be able to go and build relationships, was you like that at school?
I think so. Yeah. My reports are always consistently. He talks a bit too much. Could apply himself a bit better. Was very capable. Very capable boy, but just could apply himself a bit better. But I had a very fortunate upbringing. I won't yarp on for this, but for too long. But my mum and dad were great. Dad was awesome, musician, bit of a rock star in my eyes, you know, did very well in the music scene in the 80s, and, you know, that afforded me a good school, and it, you know, I went to private school for a long time, and Mum was great. You know, got looked after very well, well supported, thrown into music lessons, you know, got to play every instrument under the sun. You know, it was a great upbringing. It was really solid. I had a lot of fun. And that gave me a lot of confidence. You know, I did drama lessons, you know, I had a really good sort of like, I don't know, get on stage and do something boy type life, you know. So I was always performing, or I was always doing something that was a little bit kind of out there. Wasn't particularly fond of like the academics. I was all right at certain topics, but no, it wasn't, you know, my strengths were in performing or doing something like that. So yeah, I think naturally because of that, I'm all right in social scenarios. You know, I've always enjoyed people. I've always loved being, you know, loved having friends, you know, and having a good and strong friendship circle. And, you know, that's been a massively important part of probably my life, which has probably made these types of scenarios much easier versus perhaps, you know, having a bit more of a sheltered existence or being a bit more introverted. I definitely think I was a little bit too much the other way when I was a very young person. I was a bit like and I definitely think I probably rubbed a few people up the wrong way when I was, you know, I'm talking like 12, 13, 14 in those really formative years. Too cocky probably, too little bit, you know, a little bit arrogant maybe even. And then you get pulled down a few pegs. When I left my private school, I went to a grammar school, going from having 14 people in a year to having 300 people in a year. And it was quite a stark contrast. So yeah, that was quite an eye-opener. Massively game-changing for me, though. That was the best. I mean, I loved high school. It was incredible. It was the best time. Yeah, I met all my lifelong friends are all school friends. You know, I've still hang out with them all.
Love that.
You know, which is great. And you know, a couple of us went to college together, and you know, they've been around me since then. You know, and we were all very, very close.
I love that.
But yeah, so I think that's definitely helped.
And what was the
back to reality a little bit as well.
And what was the, like, you talked about the music and stuff, and
Yeah.
obviously your dad, like, what was that the dream?
Yeah.
As a
Yeah, it was and still is probably like that closet dream. But yeah, so he was a songwriter, singer-songwriter. He was very successful in what I would consider success.
Yeah.
Now I say success, I have to think about whether or not how to frame that in the context of our conversation. But I would say he was successful, you know, and I think other people would. Not think he probably would have said that he wasn't as successful as he would have liked to have been in that regard, because the music industry is very cutthroat. But you know, he wrote songs for some very, very big groups and bands, and he was, you know, an A&R director at RCA Records in Australia, where I was born in Australia. So, you know, we had a really good life there. So, yeah, the dream was always to follow in his footsteps, I think, really. You know, so I was always in studios when I was young. I was always at recording studios and smashing drums when they're trying to record guitar in the other room and just being generally annoying. But I got to see a lot of that and be in that environment. And my first job, obviously, was in you know, in the music world, which was amazing to me, a kid at like 15 doing work experience at the biggest music shop in Brighton and getting to be around all these incredible instruments. I was literally in heaven. Like, I remember getting dropped off and being really nervous, and then just walking into this like Aladdin's cave of instruments of, you know, varying degrees, and just being like, oh my God, like the smell I can remember the smell of it in the boxes. I remember I remember everything about it. It was just like, this is incredible. And I'd be, you know, fast forward a few years and I'd be in college, and you know, people would be like, oh, I want to get this book. You know, I was at music college doing music technology degree, and there'd be people in the room that they'd want to get a piece of kit, and I sell that. You know, I can get you a deal on that. You know, I was so proud to kind of represent it and be part of it, and I really, really, really wanted to be a musician of some description. I got really into music production when I was very young, actually, like much younger than probably a lot of people. I mean, you get into it now when you're 10, but back then it was like, you know, computers weren't what they are now, and you know, as I'm sure everyone will know, but yeah, so that's where I really wanted to go, that direction of being a music producer. I had a great little bedroom production set up in my mum and dad's house, and drove them mad, playing music too loud and really repetitive, and you know. But then I kind of kept that music stuff with me, you know, even up until probably I met my wife, actually. And then that, you know, then we've got sort of different priorities, and then kids come along and suddenly things change and stuff. So I don't do as much of it as I'd like to anymore. But yeah, I still try and tinkle the ivories every now and then, and you know, have a little play.
Lovely, like just listening to, like, I talk often about do things that light us up, and you know, and things that we're passionate about, and I say it back to the kids, and I'll encourage them to. But you get, even sitting opposite you now, like how much you light up talking about it, like the excitement, around it.
If I could sit in a recording studio for the large period of my day tinkering and making sounds and making songs and trying to make a hit record, I think I'd probably be quite content. That little pipe dream, I think, is probably you need to keep on top of your game with that stuff as well. I mean, even sitting here looking at this, it brings me back to being in these environments, having these things in my own sort of house and tinkering and being there. But it was time intensive. You've got to apply yourself to it. You've got to be really serious about it. You can't be distracted. The ones that really make it in that world are like obsessed. Everything else is sacrifice. You've got to be that. I think you've got to be that way inclined. I think that goes for anything really. Obsessive people that kind of stick to those things can end up becoming amazing at those things, and maybe but at the detriment of other things in their life. And I wasn't sure I don't know whether I was happy to or ready to sacrifice every other aspect of my life for that obsession. And it wasn't an obsession, it was a hobby that I really enjoyed. And had I made a living from it, it would have been fantastic. I tried to crack the jingle world at one point and do all that. That's always the first entry level point into being a music producer. You make an advert for someone, or and then someone else asks you to come back, and then maybe it's a kid's TV show and you maybe start doing some theme tunes for that stuff. I mean, that would have been amazing, and I would have really enjoyed that. And then it's selling your soul a little bit by doing music that you might not like, but hopefully it pays the bills. And there is a route, I think, in.
Yeah, because it's hard. I guess there's that thing of going. There's two things to that. Like one, going, find what like you say, find what your passion is, and then there'll be a job that you can get within that thing, and that's a great thing. But actually, there is elements of, especially when you find something that you're really passionate about, and then it becomes your job, and actually potentially there's the other flip side to that, isn't there, that you can lose a little bit, because actually this is now, I've got to do this because it's got to that's what's bringing in my money. You're not doing it just purely out of love and passion. You're doing it because
now it's bringing the cash in.
It's bringing
it's a job.
It's a job.
It's fun.
And there is that element to it, isn't there?
There's incredible highs in that world and incredible lows as well. And I saw that firsthand with the old man, because he had those incredible highs and touring the world and being on stage in the biggest venues in the States. And
who would it? Share some names.
Name drop Bone. He wrote a quite a well known song actually on an artist called John Farnham, who's a big Australian artist. They had a song called "You're the Voice" that's a huge record in the 80s. Still gets played on the radio today. He was, him and all those guys just bundling in the studio, and Dad wrote a song on that Whispering Jack album which did very well. Worked with In Excess. He worked with he opened for Otis Redding. He was there's loads of stories. I mean, I could go on forever. It's like a ridiculous story, but with those highs of being on stage and the thrills of the crowd and the backstage antics and the 80s music industry, which was bananas, to the lows of not having that adoration anymore and not having the thrill of that environment, and the adrenaline rush and all those things that come with that are very challenging for people to manage. I think why it's the same with sports star. Anyone that rises to a level of fame, let's say, that's used to that kind of attention or that thrill or that buzz, when it's not there anymore, really struggles with it. And I think that's when challenges can occur in their lives, and maybe depression, and maybe some of those things start to creep in a little bit, and you see them turn into substances, or you see them, unfortunately, happen to that. But there's things that go on in life, I think, and then they constantly seeking validation or looking for other ways to get that, and that might come from cooking now. Okay, I now cook, and I want to feed everyone because they're going to give me that feedback to tell me that I'm good enough, and that there's definitely an element of where you then start to sort of seek out other things, I think, to then give you that feeling that you once had that maybe isn't there anymore.
It's so fascinating like that. There's so much in life, isn't there, that we go down, and again, just through my own journey and trying to learn, and especially where I am at the moment, and you try and look and go one of the things that come out of me doing some journaling was, the biggest thing was, why am I not enough? That was the question I wrote at the top of it. I was really emotional. I was really I come out and I've journaled for the first time ever, and I'm like, why am I not enough? And there's so much about, I think, everyone, that we we crave certain things, and you talk about that validation. We crave maybe external validation from other people. Social media has heightened that because we go online to try and get extra validation, and we're trying to get that thing. And it's so much for me is looking at like when do we start, and why do we wait necessarily to get to this age before we start looking inward to go like why, and asking some of those questions. Why is it that we crave that? What is it? How can we find peace? Because I wonder how many sports stars, musicians, people have maybe, many have maybe died of suicide or along them lines purely on the basis of that they can't find peace within themselves because of that higher.
Well, I think, again, like going back to sort of luxury positions, I think being able to think introspectively like that and have a perspective about how you perceive things like you do is not often shared by lots of other people. So someone that might have those amazing highs and those thrill-seeking highs and those experiences in life which are incredible and it'd be hard to replicate, then coming down to the lows might not be able to think about things the way you do or the way that you might do in terms of how do I get back to that? Or I certainly know, like, just I can only comment for my dad, like I don't think he recognised it in himself actually that some of those challenges post music career were probably because of the fact he'd had such extreme highs and now he's in a completely different position in life. Don't think he ever thought about it as introspectively as like I'm gonna perhaps I'm seeking something that isn't there, or I don't need to seek that, whatever it might be. I don't know if he had the foresight or the vision or even the inclination to go down that path. I think it maybe comes with education, or it comes with a different lifestyle, or it comes with some. But yeah, certainly, I'm sure there's people out there that don't have the capacity nor the inclination, or perhaps even the guidance or understanding that to think about things in that way.
Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast.
But do you think, like, things I've questioned a lot at the moment is why is it that a lot of these questions I'm asking myself now, is it a privileged position, or is it what? When is it too early to start asking them questions?
Well, that's it.
Like we look at our kids, right? We've got kids similar sort of ages. When do you there's elements of life that I go, because I'm really conscious. A lot of the stuff I talk about it could be quite serious, and we go,
it's deep.
It's deep conversations, right? And things that we want to ask ourselves that can be really deep conversations. But there is elements where you go, just don't, you ain't got to worry about it. Go and have fun. Your kids go and have fun. Exactly. But is there, again, back to skills and tools that we can give that next generation to start finding out what their values are? When do you think that can start?
God, I don't know. I've no idea. I mean, I definitely wouldn't want to potentially take away any of the joy of just being a young'un and working a lot of this stuff out yourself. Because sometimes if you're too mindful about this, the seriousness and the realities, or even some of these more deeper topics, perhaps you miss that chance to make your own mistakes and to cock up and to enjoy, maybe not do that, maybe find those successes as well, those macro wins or whatever it is as you go on that journey of life, and actually probably getting to a point where you start getting into your 40s and 50s where you start reflecting a bit more, because that's natural, right? You're going to look, you've got a longer period of time to look back on now, and you've got a bigger bank of memories, I guess, versus I can remember stuff probably from being like 6 probably until now, but those they are distant memories, you're piecing those things together, whereas I can pretty much remember everything from school until now, or like 16, 17. I pretty much remember most of the things that have gone on since then, and most of the cock-ups I've made, and most of the things I've done all right as well, and but I do think it's been later in life that I've been more reflective, and I think that's okay.
I
think that's all right.
I think you're right. Like, I'm just purely where I am. I'm challenging so much.
Yeah.
I think that the podcast and that, because I'm curious, I'm just challenging a lot of stuff, and there's. I love the how you've just described, because there's a part of me going, how would it affect people's mental health if we were to ask these questions at a younger age? I don't get to a point of crisis, say midlife crisis, people say awakening, whatever path you're on with that, I guess. But when you get to this midlife and people do start asking them questions, what happens if we was to do that at an earlier stage? Would that not impact them? But is it that the reason we get to this point is because we have gone out and experienced life to whatever levels we have, whether it be at the heights of what your dad achieved, or sports people, or that type of adoration, or it's just living a relatively normal life, whatever normal life looks like, but we're just going out and doing that on a daily basis, but making mistakes and tripping over them, and just experiencing life, to then ask that. You've got to do that before you can start asking them questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, you see that in its rawest form when you're raising toddlers. Like, I've got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I watch them do stupid stuff every day. I'm just like, what the hell are you doing? But they do genuinely pick it up quite quickly that they probably shouldn't do that shit, you know? Yeah. Just so many different instances of the ridiculousness that goes on, but you do learn, I guess, really. And I do think those experiences, whether they're when you're a toddler or, whether you're 25 or 30 or 40, they do teach you something, Yeah. And you've got to stumble a bit, I think.
Yeah. And again, it's back to that thing. Like, but I was talking about it this morning, actually, and I was talking about reframing. Obviously, the whole thing with me is reframing success, but actually, the flip side to that is reframing potentially what failure looks like. Right? Like, actually, if failure was just purely, as soon as you mention the word failure, people's immediate thing is a negative connotation, right, around that. But what if it was failure was, that's a brilliant learning opportunity, and someone got excited, you failed at that. What did you learn from that? And that's their immediate reaction to it. If kids and, again, society as a whole, we would change that narrative, how different would that be for people? And I'm not saying that actually you want to go out, we don't set out on a task to fail at it, but actually if the narrative around it was, if I do fail, it's just purely, I'm going to learn something from this, and that's a really good thing, that would be... How would that be in life?
It feels like this is on like the threads of like acceptance. Whether you succeed or you fail, it's just the acceptance. It's like,
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
like if you're like in that context, what you're talking about there, like failing being accepted and actually celebrated in a sense, because you're going to come out stronger or richer or with more knowledge or whatever it is that you're going to come out with. That failure might lead to something better, and most of the people you'll talk to that have had any success in their life, unless it was just sort of hand spoon fed to them, which is very rare, will tell you that they failed a bunch of times before they cracked whatever it is that they've cracked. So again, those lessons are valuable. So I think, and again, like being successful, if you accept that if you get to that point where we're talking about success again, and you accept that you've been successful, then maybe that's all right as well, So there's I think acceptance is probably the key word here in both of those scenarios.
I love that. I think you're right. And then I guess I want to touch on, if we can, like we've gone down this route, we're talking about challenges and stuff like that, and you mentioned about your dad and getting to the point there, and then sometimes people, especially you mentioned sports stars, especially, they will come out. I've spoke to a couple who've been on here and talk about what does it look like after you finish playing football, or after you finish playing that, and sort of, I guess, people falling into depression. Talk to me, I guess, about like some challenges. I guess, have you faced some challenges over your life, your career, or
I mean, definitely not. I think personally been impacted by, those real lows, where maybe it's substance abuse or maybe it's other things that come into fray. But I've experienced, sadly, a lot of people close to me committing suicide or completing suicide, whatever the term is now. I think there's a few different ways.
Die of suicide, yeah. People die of suicide.
So that's been yes, harrowing experiences. Unfortunately, far too many people that I've known have gone down that road at young ages as well. And yeah, that's been interesting to observe, especially one of my closest friends. He took his own life in 2009, which was an awful time. He was living with me at the time as well, and it was just, yeah, I mean, reflecting on it, just the horrible scenario for everyone involved. And in his instance, I'd say he didn't really experience those real highs. There wasn't like a moment where he was like up and everything was amazing. He was just kind of consistently, I would say, flat. For as long as I knew him, he was never like peak excitement and happiness, and like wasn't doing anything that was particularly high level thrill seeking, that sort of thing. That then suddenly there was a gap that wasn't there. He was just very kind of low, I would say. No, not unhappy chappy most of the time. He was still funny, and he was still, there's obviously, we were good friends and stuff, but there was this element of unhappiness in him, I think, inherently. He was just there's something about him that I could tell he just didn't love life that much. Wasn't long destined for this world. There was just something that was there about him. And then, yeah, when he eventually took his own life, and you can never really blame anyone, I don't think, when that happens to someone, because at the end of the day, regardless of what external factors might or might not have been present when he did that, someone has taken the choice that he's made. He made a choice to do what he did, and after falling out with someone that he was in a relationship with, just a silly argument that there's a much longer story behind that. This isn't something you just do. This is something that's in someone's mind potentially for a very long time. And they might have gone through something that maybe flips them over the edge. But yeah, really, really tough time for him and his family. Just awful, and everyone around him really. And it has a profound impact on those. It had a massive impact on me. Like even beforehand, didn't even really. When you'd say the word suicide, it wouldn't trigger anything in me before, because you're just a young, I think when it was 2009, so I was like, 20, early 20s, and yeah, it just never, it wasn't on my radar. It was just something that in my head at that time probably selfish people did, like, just the easy way out. And I probably just was really flippant and really like just not understanding of it at all. Didn't have any real empathy for it. Not that I didn't think things like that were incredibly sad, but it just wasn't on my radar. But
I get it. It's not talked about. Is it?
It's
like
not,
you look at our
no.
age group. It's not something that's talked about, and again, there's so much shame around the conversation. Yeah. And I guess one of the reasons for me, and I'm really grateful for you sharing this with us as well. I guess is there is so much shame and those stigmas surround.
Yeah.
Even the conversation around suicide, that actually the more we can have those conversations about it, maybe the more that people don't feel as much shame, so they can come out and talk about things more when they are feeling low, that maybe that then has an impact later.
Yeah, well, you never know. I mean, it's such a deep conversation, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before in when we've met up in the past, and I think I don't, for him, he always talked when he was younger about, he'd probably die in a motorbike accident when he was in his early 20s. It was just like something he would sort of flippantly say. But, now I look back on it, it was almost a bit of a red flag. He was almost, I'll be all right. I'm just going to die when I'm like 21 in a motorbike accident anyway. It was almost like that was his, he never felt, I don't know, he felt life was really difficult. He found everything extremely challenging, which is a very strange position to be in for a young guy, surrounded by like quite out there friends who are all kind of, quite supportive, and but when everything that then happens to that person in their life that's negative, certainly for him anyway, just compounded and just became more and more of a weight for him to bear. And I think eventually he just decided that he didn't want to bear that weight anymore, and he couldn't see a way, and I don't think wanted to see a way. He just didn't like how hard everything was. I said that to you before, I think, as well, like when we've touched on this, like everything to him seemed like a massive challenge, like meeting girls, talking to building relationships, like making friends, like He was very shy. Like when he talked to you, you could see he'd not want to make eye contact. He'd want to because he found interaction challenging. You know, there was things that he loved. He loved cricket and he loved these things that were really like, you know, things that he loved and had a passion for. But much of life was difficult for him. Like standard day-to-day stuff like working was challenging. You know, he did find a career in the end, but I don't think he loved it. He wasn't passionate about it. There was lots of things that were going on that I just think compounded to the point where, you know, the thought of having to potentially start a new relationship or get back on the bandwagon in that regard or whatever was just too challenging for him, and he just thought, I'm done, I'm exhausted, I just want out, you know. And I don't, you know, that was a really tough pill to swallow for a while, you know, and it's sort of mixtures of feelings of sadness and anger and hurt and all the rest of it. But the reality is, like, I kind of got it a bit as well, a bit further on. I kind of like, not that I think it was the right thing to do by any stretch of the imagination, but I kind of got it from his perspective because I've thought more about him and how he was. So I was like, I definitely don't agree with it. Like, I'm definitely sad it happened, and but I'm also I'm at peace with the decision he made.
And what you said about the impact, did like his family around him, was you close with them? Like, did you?
Yeah, I was, but you know, I have very, you know, this is public forum, so it's a bit of a tricky one, but I have mixed feelings quite openly, I guess, really, because I don't necessarily feel like there was the best support unit around, but there was so many circumstances going on in the background that were grown-up things at that time. You know, we were kids when we, you know, but so there were things that happened that I don't necessarily agree with, that I think where the support got kind of removed probably too early. And then the things that happen around him with regards to family that were really not nice and that weren't ideal. But I still don't necessarily blame them, and I don't necessarily you know, think what he did should have been because of those things that happen. Like, people have hard shit go on in life all the time, you know, and it's about how you rise to the occasion, not like, you know. So yeah, and they were profoundly impacted as well themselves, you know, particularly his sister, who sadly passed away now as well, not through suicide, but she passed away. I mean, they've had a hideous time, that family. They lost another one of the kids as well not so long after that, which again is just, you know, they've had 3 out of their clan, which is just, you know, shocking, really. You wouldn't wish that on anyone. It's just absolutely horrendous. But so yeah, I mean, yeah, just so yeah, but that, it's been hard. I mean, I've always struggled with the family because I'm constantly just reminded of the situation and him, and it's just easier for me to sadly bury my head in the sand a little bit with it, and just, again, that ignorance is bliss stuff. I'd rather just crack on. And
but you're like that happening, I guess, to him, like, did it impact like your outlook on life or choices you've made moving forward, or not? How has that?
I think it's had a massive impact. Like, we were very, very close. Like, he used to spend Christmas at my house, you know, he lived with me. We were like brothers, you know. It was very, you know, but all the friends that I have from that group from at school, which I alluded to earlier, no, we're all like that, you know. But he was, you know, we were very, very close. We used to go on holiday together, you know. It was like, so it was a real tough pill to swallow. You know, I was the one they called when you know, the police called me. It was just, you know, we were looking for him for days and we couldn't find him, and it was just like it was all very dark. So I've had certainly the first. I mean, it was just all such a shock at the time, really, like shocking and not shocking, really, I guess. But it was all, you know, I kind of knew when no one had heard from him for the first couple of hours, like, I don't think he's coming back. That was kind of my gut instinct. Yeah, I kind of thought there's something not right here. And then, yeah, since then, I think everyone around, including me, has had something change within them. You know, whether they now see suicide differently. Like, I certainly, like I said beforehand, didn't really think too much about it. And now I would say, not for me, from my perspective, but I now think about it more in terms of the concept of it, you know, and what it is. And, you know, if I day doesn't go by where I don't think about him, of course, you know, but the actual concept of suicide I'm much more aware of now, if you know what I mean. Like, it's present in my mind that people, and, you know, and there's been numerous people since then as well, you know, which I've spoken to you about before. But so I know, you know, I definitely think it's impacted my understanding and my connection with that subject. But other things have happened since then as well. You know, certainly the way I feel, the way I approach life, like my awareness of mortality changed. Like I became much more aware, and I didn't want to be either. Much more aware of, you know, survival. You know, like I much more anxious about doing adventurous things, and you know, suddenly like planes are a bit more scary, you know, and you know, certain things in life I became much more kind of, I don't know, just something changed from that period until even where I am now. That event, or the surrounding times around that event, things around that event have changed my outlook and the way I approach certain things in life, which has been really strange. And certainly other people in the group would probably attest to that as well, you know, that they've all had something kind of impact them as a result of that event, and they've all been more aware. You know, another friend of ours attempted suicide that was very close with him, you know, several years later, and would almost directly credit that event, I think, as probably one of the main reasons that he decided to try his own luck at some point as well. You know, there's been a huge knock-on impact, I think, since then for everyone that was in the group. And so that single event has created a knock-on impact across so many different people's lives, which is quite amazing, really, in a I guess a good way and a not so good way either. You know.
And as a group, do you talk about him? Do you talk about
Yes
the situation? Did that after it happened? Was it something that you talked about to help you process? I guess.
Yeah,
a little bit,
I think so. Yeah, we did. And we still do, and we still, you know, there's still things that we do, like ritually, you know, that are just things that are, I still struggle with it, if I'm honest with you. So I don't know why, like I said, I bury my head in the sand a little bit with it, because I don't know why. It's almost like my brain doesn't want to go there, so it just doesn't. So it almost subconsciously fights my ability to, I'm quite happy to kind of converse with about it, but when it's a real, like, heart to heart with someone about it, I'm not interested, you know. I'm like, no, that's all right. I'll leave it where it is, you know. I kind of deal with it in my own way. But we do. I mean, there's, you know, we'll mostly take the piss, like he's still around. That's basically what we'll do. You know, call him a moron or whatever. You know, it's largely piss taking, really, and reminding ourselves of how ridiculous some of the situations we got into and some of the funny the times that we had, and like it's largely positive when we do. Especially now, most of us have got kids and whatnot, and like, you know, he would have. You know, what would he be doing now, and would he have kids, and you know, they'd all know him, and you know, my wife never got to meet him, you know, that's strange to me, you know. She's been in my life for so long now. It's just like, I can't believe you never met him, you know. But she sort of feels like she knows him because
you still talk about him.
Yeah, still talk about him, and you know, in that sense, and she's seen pictures of him, and you know, we don't have loads of photos either, because there wasn't camera phones and stuff that, you know, even going back that, and it was not even that long ago. But we still don't have a lot of like memorabilia, let's say. I've got odd bits and bobs, but she's seen a few photos, and she's like, oh, he's really handsome, and he, you know, I was like, yeah, he was really, you know, he had a lot going for him. You know, it's a shame he didn't see things in the way that everyone else, or that others possibly did. You know, he saw things very differently, and that's.
Was he as a was he? I guess I'm just trying to picture. Yeah. Was he able to, like, when he struggled, or was he someone that would share stuff like that with you or the group, or
no, sometimes, but not really. He was quite shut down in that regard. He sometimes would, but most of the time, no. I mean, there was just something you could just tell, you know, that he was just not particularly content. He just struggled a lot with the realities of life.
It's like, listen, and you said obviously since then as well, you had other people that had died of suicide.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day, funnily enough, because friends of ours have got they've got like a camper van thing down in Dorset at this place called Rockley Park, and I went down one of my family holidays, my mum and my dad, and they said I could bring a couple of friends, so I took the aforementioned chap who sadly passed, and another chap who's also sadly passed, both by suicide. They're with my two friends that I took down there, and we still go down there every now and then. I'm sort of reminded of the fact that we had those, you know, we had a little family holiday with those guys there, and it's crazy to think like neither of them are around now. That's a mad thing, because that wasn't even that long ago. You know, okay, it was probably 25 years ago, but to me it still feels like yesterday, you know. And yeah, and yeah, so I mean, there was like 4 people in my year at school that ended up doing it, which was tragic, really. You know, someone who I was very good friends with at school in the same year, loads of same classes, and we had a right laugh together. He took his life not too long after my friend I was telling you about a moment ago. And I remember getting the news. And I was sitting with my friend, and we were hanging out in his shed at the time playing Xbox or something like that. And I remember looking at him, and I was like, I don't know if I've got the energy for this one. And he was like, I haven't, mate, either. And we both kind of just resided to the fact that we weren't gonna do it. We weren't gonna engage in the process of mourning and grieving and going through that process again. We were both so exhausted from the first time happening, we almost kind of just shut it out. We were just like, it's not healthy for either of us to go down this spiral again of unhappiness. And you know, we hadn't been particularly close with this particular person since probably leaving school. That was like nice memories, and it was easier for us to distance ourselves from that one, and it was healthier for us too, I think, as well. But then I had another friend who passed away. It's got to have been a few years ago now. He struggled. I was really good friends with him when I was younger, and then as we got sort of later in life, struggled a bit more with him. He was a bit more wayward, kind of went off the beaten track a little bit. It was harder to remain close with him because he was getting into things that I wasn't getting into, and trouble and things like that. It's just like, I can't do this. And I think, at my point in life then was, if people are not offering me anything positive, if it's just like purely negative interaction, it's like better to just sort of distance myself from that. And I still, to a point, think that's sensible. If someone's actually going to be really a negative force in your life, then it's possibly a good person to disassociate yourself with. And that's kind of what I did, to be fair. But he then, he went through an identity crisis as well. I was hearing murmurs, and I was like, there's no way that these murmurs are correct. All sorts of things going on, cross-dressing and other things. And I was like, there's more chance of me doing that, someone like, there's no way that kid is doing that. And it turns out that he was, and I think had gone through an experimental sort of transition phase. I think got to a point where it realised that actually this isn't for me, and went back to the opposite way. Decided that he didn't want to do that, and then I think. Eventually, his parents both died. He got down in the dumps, and I think he just decided again, like, this isn't for me. I think he found life really difficult as well, and I think he wanted to find it easier than he did. And I think he put himself out there a bit more, but I just think he really struggled with it as well. I think, like, didn't know how to make friends that easily, so would do stupid things to get friendship. He would try and, like, when we were younger, he would do crazy things that people would like him. It was just like that kind of guy. So I think he really struggled in later life when people weren't so impressed by those things anymore. And I think he probably felt quite isolated eventually, and probably thought, this isn't for me. I think once his parents both passed away, I think they were his lifeline. Like, he didn't really have that anything else, I don't think. So I think for him it was just time. So he passed away. It wasn't even that long ago. And again, I hadn't been closely connected with him for a long time, but he was still reaching out to me here and there, and asking me to meet up with him and stuff. And I just, like, I couldn't. It just was not. It wasn't the thing. And I've looked back on that. Like, is there an element of guilt as well? Like, if I'd have met up with him and talked to him and gone for a drink with him, would it have helped? But what would have that done for me at that time as well? And, like, it was the right decision not to do those things for me. And I'm not going to be personally responsible, and I don't feel personally responsible if someone makes an extreme choice. Maybe it would have made a bit of difference, but I don't know. And ultimately, it's not my responsibility to fix everyone.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And I think this is, again, the reason why it's such an important conversation, is because, again, there's like one of the things around suicide. I've done some suicide prevention training, and one of the things is actually that people won't talk about it or won't ask that question because they think, what happens if I cause them to do that? Actually, if someone's going to do it, they're going to do it, right? And it's there, and ultimately, ultimately there was always a choice, right? There's always a choice. Like, some people say there isn't, and mental illness is terrible, in a crisis with it at the moment, and how do people get through that? And if you're in that deep dark depression, some people would say it's not a choice, but there is certain things that we can do on a daily basis to help ourselves, right? To make that choice to try and take a different path, and certainly on your part, you can't take on someone else's burden. We're not going to force, or we're not going to make someone make those decisions, right? But again, if the conversation is more open to be able to talk about it, where there's less shame and stigma attached to it, maybe that, because I mean, what experiencing all that you have, what needs to change, like within, like how do we start to fix this problem?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? It's because I don't know is the honest answer. You know, there's so many things that you reflect on and you think, oh, I could have done that differently, and maybe if this hadn't happened. I mean, I know from my close friend, he found out that he found out some things about his family that wasn't great. His support network, his family support network, kind of got pulled out from under him when he was quite young. A series of things that happened to him, what he probably believed were, quite big and serious for him, made all the difference, I guess, in what ended up becoming the final result. But those things happening to someone else might not have done that. Those things might have made that other people go in a completely opposite direction and go, okay, I'm going to be strong, I'm not saying he was weak, but I'm going to be different, I'm going to be focused, I'm going to channel all this negativity into something positive. And you hear again about successful people. A lot of those people have had real hardships in the past. They've had, they've come from absolute dirt sometimes, and turned that into completely the opposite scenario, and turned, complete tragedy into complete success, or to whatever that definition of it in their context is. So I think it's always individual. I don't know if there is a set list of things that you could implement, or like a strategy, or even like a playbook that's there that would maybe lower the chances of something like that happening, because people, it's all in their context. Like, people see things differently. People associate tragedy to in a completely different way. They'll see certain things in life that will impact them differently than someone else. Some people will gravitate towards those challenges and to those setbacks and to those horrible things that might go on, and really rise to the occasion and steamroll through it and just become this incredible champion of a person, that manages to deal with that. And other people might not. And I don't know how you would necessarily implement anything that would necessarily dictate. It's got to come from that person. And I guess the only thing you could potentially do maybe is when your young people are young, is build them up, is encourage them, is to reinforce how great they are and how special they are, and make them see, that there's always things will always things will likely get better. Things will always life will always have like shit moments. It will always have like challenges along the way, but largely, again, it's individually, but largely you'll get through those and you'll come out stronger, and there'll be something else. And I can get when things like might seem really glum and seem really desperate, and like, okay, how am I ever going to get out of this shit, and you might decide that there's no way out of it, and that's it. I can kind of get it, not that I'm agreeing necessarily that that's the last thing you should do, that's the thing you should do. It should be maybe the last thing, but I kind of empathise. But at the same time, I guess if we could get into people younger and just tell them how special they are, and surround them with love, and make them realise how wanted they are and how needed they are, and actually how profound the impact would be on anyone else if they weren't there. I think maybe that helps. But I just think if someone's, like you said a bit earlier, like if someone's maybe got to a point where they're there in their mind, I'm not sure how much you can do to claw them back in. You can I hope you can, and I'm sure there are many instances where people have come back from there. But I just wonder how much is still in their mind about it, and how much, they, that's still a worry for everyone else around them, and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's a very tricky topic. Yeah, because I'm not an expert, by the way, just a caveat. I'm a fucking moron about this in reality, but I have sadly experienced this a few more times than I'd like.
I guess, and again, mate, I'm genuinely really grateful for you, because even that conversation we had, over a coffee, and we was talking about this subject, and one of the reasons I was like, I guess wanted to maybe share this conversation on here is that, again, for me, I think one of the challenges is to try and remove some stigmas and shame around just talking about suicide. And when people have experienced it, as you have done with people who are close to you, that we have a perception of it, and if we can have a conversation, an open conversation around it, then maybe it just gives other people some skills to be able to look around and what's going on with their people close to them and within their lives. And I think actually there's different elements. I think one of the things you've highlighted, and something that for me I think is really, really important, is that we need to start younger with I feel that having these conversations here, maybe I can have a little bit of an impact.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe having open conversations like this and talking about this and offering help and the You're Right Mate campaign and all the different things that I'm trying to do to have a little bit of an impact. But I think prevention is better than cure, and one of the things that the little lunchbox letters I've started to do, because it does that, right? I think if it was just, what does it look like if every kid is constantly given that message that they're enough, just as they are, and
I get that.
constantly given that message that they're loved, and all of them things that we go should maybe be a natural thing, but maybe are not, and because of life gets caught up, and but just a constant message on a daily basis that they are amazing, and encourage that as much as we can. On the flip side to that as well, actually encouraging them to talk and share emotions. This is where, like, for me, one of the biggest things, like, and again, why this conversation, because if we can have a conversation and share openly emotions and how we're feeling about certain things, and given the skills to be able to do that, to process our emotions and articulate them, does that then have an impact as well? If we're giving them skills from a young age, you know what I mean? Maybe that has an impact later in life.
Well, I think we talked about, I couldn't agree more. I think, it's got to, really. I think, like, I wouldn't want to be guilty of, like, raising awareness of these topics with young'uns.
No.
I know you're not suggesting that. I think the idea of, like, encouraging and loving and letting them know they're enough and giving them the tools to articulate how they're feeling and those sorts of incredibly healthy.
Yeah.
In this context, and I think, the more that's being done versus maybe making kids aware, that it's a slippery slope if you don't do these things, which I think that's quite unhealthy.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think I mentioned this before as well, and I don't know how relevant it is in the context of suicide, but that there's a lot to be said about intrusive thoughts and those things that are closely twinned with anxieties and panics and fear and those sorts of things, and the internal dialogue and all of those things, and there's things that go on in however many thoughts that we have a day. I can't remember exactly what the number is, but there's so many thoughts that we have every day, and there's one or two that maybe stick out because they don't feel comfortable and they don't feel normal. They're just normal thoughts, but they maybe jar you a little bit because they're not necessarily on your moral compass, or whatever it might be. And I'm sure we've all experienced those things before, and everyone goes through them but don't really understand what they are. And I think some education around those things, like, it's normal to have quirky thoughts every now and then, and knowing what they are and knowing how to sort of process those and deal with them and to kind of let them come and go versus dwelling on them. And I don't know how much that impacts people with depression and anxieties and people that end up becoming suicidal, how many of those little voices or little thoughts that they have, they amplify because they jar them and then they dwell on them, and then those things turn into something more, and then they take action on those things perhaps or whatnot. I don't know, but I'm sure there's something in that I think, I was talking about intrusive thoughts to someone recently, and they were, they're just intrusive thoughts, they just come and go. And I was like, that's easy for you to say because, you understand it, you know what they are. But there's a lot of people out there that probably don't, and probably get quite scared by those things and don't really know how to deal with that.
When you take that to the extreme, like the episode that come out recently with Ollie Newton, and he go to the extreme of that, which is he suffers from OCD, but like an extreme version of OCD where his intrusive thoughts were played so much on his mind that he felt as if actually as he acted on those things, and he had to make notes to himself to to show that he didn't. That where was I at this time? Because actually, if he's had that thought, could that have happened then? Like,
Right.
so for example, walking past someone, and on a train station and having an urge to push that person onto the train track, like that's then he'd have to go back over and go, did that actually happen?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? So again, I think you're right. There is that, like, this is stuff that's not even talked about or mentioned. Would we give people a better understanding of
what's going on in their
what's
mind?
going on in their mind? And actually, again, back to stigmas and shame and all of the stuff that if certain subjects and things were talked about, and so much of that then lends itself for me within the education system more around life skills and emotions and emotional intelligence. I think this is latching on, like these type of conversations, is latching on more to the emotional intelligence side of things instead of academic stuff, right? Because actually what happens if we are talking about that and going and just getting a better understanding of who we are as individuals and understanding different things that are going on in our brain and our thought processes, if we can start to unpick that at a younger age, is that the start to tackling this mental health crisis? Is that the start? Because we're just getting more as individuals, we're getting more.
I do worry a little bit about young people, especially at the moment. It's just so easy to be influenced and influence others because you're just all connected, obviously, through whatever social media madness is going on, And so I do worry. I mean, the amount of bullying that goes on and the horrendous things these kids are doing to each other and sending around these videos and pictures of each other and, ruining people's lives with the. I mean, bullying has always been around. It'll never go away. Kudos to anyone that can combat it, and you've got to build real resilience as a young person, But nowadays, it's even more ridiculous. It's even easier to be a keyboard warrior and bash someone easily with a mobile phone, and ruin someone's life. I know someone very, very well right now whose daughter's being horrendously bullied through phones, and they're trying to get the school to deal with it. School are getting the police involved. It's like, it's a nightmare, And I just think, how do you even keep on top of that stuff? And there's young people, really young people, taking their own lives because of the way they're being treated through their mobile phones. It's just, and in person, of course, but. It's so hard to, it's not like, I just don't know what the answer is to it, but there's just so many external factors right now that are making it far easier to impact children, to make them grow up too fast in that regard, like in a technological way as well. There's some great benefits to it, of course. I'm an advocate for technology and for these sorts of things, but I'm also I'm worried about, young people and how their minds being just rotted away by this tripe and the ability for people to just ruin their lives through, and how do you build resilience through that,
Because you think, like, you go back. I'm obviously a few years older than you, but you go back to being at school, and we didn't have like all of the stuff that they've got. Yeah, of course, bullying went on in my school. And I was really fortunate. I was never bullied. I was never a bully, and I was never bullied. No. But of course, it was there. I saw it, and on a regular basis, But the level that it can go to now, because they can get you anyway. At least, even when you was bullied at school in our age, you go, I'm going to leave school, I'm going to go home, and it's a safe environment, and it's done. But it's not.
It's not done. Now you get it on your phone. You get it, everywhere you go. Just.
And again, you look at and I'm with you as well. I love modern technology is incredible. Right? Look at the things that we're able to do now, and the advancement of AI and all the other stuff that's coming is amazing, right? Yeah. Mind blowing, and hopefully it makes our lives better. That's what we hope for. Again, I always refer back to education, I guess, and where we are with kids, because actually some of the stuff that we are not going to need to teach kids anymore, because technology is going to do so much of them things, right? So, is it, again? I keep harping on, but yeah, and it is. But at the same time, is it then the whole curriculum and the system the things that we're teaching them, they don't need to. The skills that we do need to are about resilience and emotions and conversations and back to what we started.
Being kinder to each other as well, right?
100%.
Like, how do you, I mean, the trouble is, the people that are doing those things, what's going on in their lives that's making them feel like this is a sensible route to traverse? What are you doing to this young person? Why are you doing it? What's going on in your life? Are your mum and dad all right? Like, are you getting, is something going on? Like what's happening to the point where you want to make this person's life such a misery? Like,
it's insecurities generally in them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
well, it's peer pressure. It's looking, all the things that go on, but just on a different scale now, and at the flick of a button. It's just like crazy. And so I think like building all those nice qualities in your own people is a great thing to do. But like, how do you, what the people that are responsible for doing these things, what are they doing? Like, what are their parents teaching them? Like, what? You need to teach your kid not to be a shithead. That would be a good start. Like, that's not hard. Love them, be present. All right, it's not everyone's going to follow the same route, but like, do all of those. Be a good person, be a good parent, be a good guide, be a good mentor.
Because it's learned, but a lot of it's learned behaviour,
right? Or it's lack of learned behaviour.
Or lack of it. Well, look, a guy who come on recently, David Eakins, he was saying about what they'd done, and this is again me. I seem to come and I talk about education, I talk about this stuff, and not necessarily I've not got a solution. You know what I mean? I'm not coming with solutions. I'm trying to find some, but I'm having a conversation about it, right? So I'm trying to get. But one of the things that he highlighted, which I think is really important, was that it is kid goes to school and they're really heightened around emotional intelligence. They're really trying to teach that within their curriculum and what they're doing.
Sure, yeah.
And for that, the teachers are trained and taught around emotional intelligence and been emotionally coaching. But also, there's a 6-week program for the parents to go in and have emotional coaching as well, because it's actually it is a 3-way thing, right? Great that let's teach kids about emotional intelligence, let's raise that emotional awareness and give them skills and toolkits around that. Teachers haven't got the skills to be able to do that. Okay, so we need to teach teachers to be able to do that. Okay, that's a big thing. But actually, that's just one part of the problem, because then the kids are going to go home, and then if the parents haven't got any emotional intelligence and they're not or not even emotional intelligence, but just haven't got the skills because of their parents and their upbringing, that's where there's going to be a problem. So everyone has got to get on this thing, isn't they?
Well,
is it that we go because there's no rule book to becoming a parent, right? So you get, but what does it look like when you go, right, actually come in and have some coaching around how you communicate with your kids, and again leading into kindness and raising that emotional intelligence and those type of things. Because actually, if all of us were on that path and we was all getting those skills, maybe that then has a bigger impact.
And you know what? When we talk about things in this context, yes, there's a lot of people that bully and not nice kids. There's a lot of kids that are bullied and that are nice kids and having a rough time. And then there's this massive space in the middle where you've got really nice, lovely children and that are really good kids and that want to learn, and that are sometimes a bit silly and a bit cheeky, but for the large part are really, they're going to be good people, and they're going to go on to do good things hopefully in life. And they're the ones that often get forgotten in the conversations about like the extremes, don't they? Because actually the reality is, it's not all bleak, luckily. It's like, I would say
100%.
overwhelmingly positive. It's just we hear so much about the sadness and the not so nice bits that we often forget the ones in the middle who are really trying and who are really doing well and are going to be productive members of society and hopefully make us all happy and do some amazing things and invent some crazy shit and go on to like make all of our lives better and stuff. Like, it's going to be those people as well. So it's just interesting, isn't it?
Because I think you're right. I think like my belief in is that inherently the majority of people are good people.
Yeah, right.
And I go into, like, my wife often would say that I've in the past has often said I'm naive in the sense that I think you think everyone's nice and lovely, but like, she works in criminal law, so her perception of people is that actually there's a lot of not great people out there. So she's got different lenses that we look at it. But I will go into any relationship or any conversation with the fact I bet you're a nice person. Do you know what I mean? Because I'll base that on my values, because I'd like to think I'm a nice person, and that's how we go. So I do believe that. But you're right. Then when you chuck in the news and social media and all them things, actually the worst part about it is that the negative news and the negative stuff gets more.
That narrative gets more noise, and then suddenly we're just surrounded by shit all the time instead of having. you know, those quieter times of actually celebrating some of the really amazing parts of our lives and our society that are there.
Yeah.
You know, we just don't hear a lot about that anymore.
Yeah,
Just hear about how sharing.
It doesn't sell.
It's not sexy,
and,
is it?
and it's so frustrating.
Child wakes up and goes to school, has a good day, comes home, has dinner, goes to bed. It's not making the news, is it? You know, or you know, person goes to work and wins best employee of the month awards. You know, it just ain't selling.
And it's like you said, it's celebrating. I think you're right. It's trying to celebrate and actually looking at the majority of people are going to be kind, loving people.
Yeah.
And the more we can encourage that, and the more noise we can give to that, and the more skills we can give the people that need a little bit more help with that, to get to more, and then maybe we change.
Yeah.
The world. Who knows?
Who knows?
But we'll give it a go,
little
mate.
by little, mate.
Little by. We're going to create some little ripples. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Some little ripples, but. Mate, honestly, I'm genuine. That conversation we had that day, I was, you know, it really, really stuck with me, and I know that, you know, I appreciate it's a difficult subject to come on and chat about, and especially people that have close to you. But I'm genuinely really grateful for you taking the time to come on and share so openly with me and them feelings around that time, and just because I do believe that the more conversations we can have, maybe we start to remove some stigmas and stuff. So
yeah, it's a pleasure, mate.
I'm generally grateful. I think a couple of things just as we're coming towards the end. I guess all the things that you like listening to your story in your life, and then the things that you've shared with us today as well. Like you go back to a young John. What advice would you give him?
Nothing. Crack on, Sam. Get on with it. You'll be all right. No, there's definitely been periods of time. So what would I give? It's difficult because there's definitely been periods of time where I'd wanted some advice. You know, I'd been like, oh, what should I do now? You know, and you know, I think the main thing is if I could go back to which era of me, I don't know, but probably things are fine. It's all going to be all right. Those periods of hardship where you know, where I've had challenges post there, you know, my dad passing away, like all those times where it's been like really shit, or if I felt lonely or isolated, you know, and then a week later, we met my wife and been together for 13 years, like, it's going to be fine. And there are going to be some really shit periods, and there are going to be some things that you go, oh, I wish that hadn't happened, you know, and there's all going to be, but, you know, it's largely going to be all right. And it might not be, it might go a bit skew if again, you know, and you might be, you know, coming back and telling yourself in 20 years' time, God, that was horrible, but we got through it and we're all right. And I think that's the main thing. If you know, things are going to be tough sometimes, but you know, you're going to get through it and you're going to be all right. That's the main thing. And that you know, crack on. That's what I would probably just say. Business as usual, boy. Crack on.
Well, what's the plans for the future? What does the future hold for you?
Oh, that is an interesting question, and one that we must continue to ponder for some time. You know, for now, it is enjoying my life with my young ones and my wife and my fam and my friends, and yeah, just watching those two little buggers thrive. That's my goal really at the moment. Just seeing what they're going to get up to next, and watching them learning how to talk and how to, you know, communicate, and you know, and watching them becoming little versions of us. It's really funny. So I think that's what the immediate future holds, and that's where I'm staying kind of present. You know, what the future holds after that, I don't know yet. You know, well, because there isn't an after that. Hopefully, that long may that continue. But you know, the first few years of this bit for me are so important. You know, I want to be present. I want to be there. I don't want to be, you know, working so much or doing other things that I miss all that bit. And I know that's one of the biggest regrets most people say is they wish if they could do it again that they didn't. You know, didn't miss those moments or those important formative years and stuff. So I think, you know, my goal, graft, work hard, bring home the bacon, as it were, but make sure that I'm not missing those important moments. And then once I feel like I'm at a stage where, you know, those little ones are doing a little bit more of their own thing, you know, maybe we're at school and we're, you know, then I think I'm going to ramp things up a bit. I think that's when I'm going to really, you know, but I'm not in any rush. I don't want to miss a thing, if I'm honest with you. So yeah, I'm enjoying a good work-life balance at the moment for sure, and the
Do you
business.
feel you've got that?
Yeah, I think
right
I've got
with-
that right. Yeah, I think I've got that right,
amazing.
which is great. I'm very happy with that, and I work hard. I work very hard. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm grafting. You can't, you can't be in charge of a business and not graft for it. But I've got great people around me. I've got the structure is great. The company works well.
What things do you have in place? Like just on that
Yeah.
thing, what things do you have in place to ensure that you have created that work-life balance? Like people listening, like,
Yeah.
ultimately for me as well, it's something I struggle with, and running my own business and doing them things and trying to get that balance. What have you got? Some strategies that you have in place that you go, I'm going to do this on a daily basis?
I'm in an advantageous position because when I took over the day-to-day, or when I became the agency director in 2020, we already had a team. So I haven't started from scratch here. I've been fortunate enough to step into a company that already had a good reputation and a good name, and I've been able to kind of tweak and but it's not been a complete sort of rebirth, as it were. I've been able to adjust the strategy and move along in a different way, and I had some great support around me in the early days of when I took this role and so on. So I've learned from good people as well. But one of the key things that I felt was in the interest of putting good people around you. I can't be amazing at any one thing. Like I can be good at. I've got to cover so many different aspects and be present in conversations about so many different things that I can't be the go-to person for operations. I can't be the go-to person for client services. I can't be the go-to person for production. I can't be these things. But so I have to put very good people in those seats. Basically, like I've got a bucket of water on my shoulder, or a monkey on my back. There's loads of different analogies, but like I need somewhere to pour my water. Otherwise, I'm just gonna have this bucket on, or I need to throw my monkey, give it to someone else. Like there has to be people in the company structure that are able to do a better job of those tasks than I'm going to do. Like so, hiring a very good operations person who's great at project management and organisation and structure has meant that I'm out of the loop on those. Not out of the loop, out of the day-to-day of those things. I don't necessarily have to be figuring out what processes we're going to implement in and how we're measuring project profitability and all those things. Like there's a person that's far better at that than I am, so get him doing that. He's really good at it, and since that's happened, incredible increases in efficiency, in profitability, in the way we measure things, in the way we report to the team, in the way that we report to the board, whatever you want to. So really good, and these are just examples. But again, so if you notice things are lacking or you're not spending enough attention on them, which I wasn't because I was spread too thin, pull someone in and put them in place so that they can do those things better than you can and give them the attention they need. Again, for client services, I would say that we are doing a really good job with client services. Clients are exceptionally happy. We're getting left positive reviews left, right and centre. We measure company satisfaction rates. We do NPS surveys. We do all sorts of things. It's incredibly high. It's really good because we put someone really good in that seat to look after clients and make sure they're happy and make sure we're doing work and we're communicating well and that there's a point of escalation so that I don't have to be in every single client conversation. So what that means is that I'm able to work on the business as opposed to be in the business all the time. I'm able to focus on things like networking and building the brand and having these types of conversations. Obviously, this hasn't been a very business-focused conversation. It's been a nice chat between two people, but ultimately, having people that can look after the really important duties that you trust and that are going to do a good job, if not better job than you would do at those things, has been worth its weight in gold. So yeah, you to employ those people, you need to be able to afford to pay for them. So you have to go and pull in a few more deals. You have to raise your targets. You have to do those things, and you have to make sure that you're not skewing the amount of people that you've got in sort of operations or client services roles versus how many people you've got actually doing the work. But there's a balance to find there, and I think that's what we found quite well. So yeah, it's putting in the right people in the right seats where there's been gaps and plugging those gaps with experience and confidence. So yeah.
And I guess that for me, like listening to you talk, that anyone listening as well, that's a sign of great leadership, right? We find the people that get. I love that analogy of getting people in the right seats, just putting people in the right seats, doing the. You're better at that than me. That's
Crack
your
on.
role. You crack on, yeah. And then and that's leadership, isn't it? It's getting the right people around you.
Everyone is better than me in the company in everything they do. That's been the biggest thing. Is surround yourself with people that are better than you.
Amazing.
That's been really good for me.
Amazing.
Because I learn every day from them.
Yeah.
And I trust them to do a really good job of it.
Yeah. And that's the other thing with leadership, trust, isn't it, as well? It's a lot of, I think a lot of leaders, and I know I've been guilty of this in the past, you go, I won't let them do that because I know I can do it in that way, and I'm going to do it quicker than them, whatever.
Yeah.
But not better, and actually you get the right people.
And it's the right people.
Yeah,
that's the really key thing, because I've been in situations where I've had the wrong people and I've had to be involved all the way again. Yeah. So that's been a big pivotal moment, pivotal shift, is like, actually it's the right people, you know, and, you know, not following the conventions, and not, you know, just because you should do things one way or do things another. It's just finding the right person to do that job. Doesn't matter who they are, where they're from, what they're you know, have they got experience? Are they good at what they do? Are they going to be able to step into a room in a commercial conversation, or into a challenging conversation, or into a, you know, to an operational focused conversation, whatever it might be? Are they going to be able to handle themselves? Are they going to be able to bring their experience? Are they going to be able to get stuff done quickly? Are they going to be doing it efficiently? Are they going to... There's loads of things, you know, and you can tick a load of those boxes. But yeah, if they tick those boxes, then good, you're onto a winner, I think.
Yeah, I love that. Mate, thank you again. It's been a brilliant,
it's been real,
wonderful conversation. I'm really grateful. Look, we have a closing tradition on this podcast.
Right, do we?
You've been to a couple of our top table events, haven't you?
Really hard ones.
These are my brand new. Look at these brand new storytelling cards.
Oh, well done.
Choose one and then pass it back to me, and I shall read it out to you.
I haven't read it.
What sparks a sense of meaning in your everyday life?
Babies. Yeah, the little ones, for sure. Yeah, the little fellas. They spark a sense of meaning, for sure. I'd actually say, like, I'd extend it to the broader family for this moment. I think it's, you know, my wife Hannah, she's amazing person, and my two little kids, they spark meaning in my life every day. The three of them, so funny. Like, every day is just hilarious. From the moment we wake up, like, they're walking into our room now with their pillows without us knowing. They both have their pillows. The older one's got, come on, you know, the other one's following behind. They both come in and they get in bed with us, and then it's all giggling, and we're watching silly shows, and like, yeah, I mean, look, it's hard work as well.
Yeah,
like, but that's the spark of meaning right there. Like, absolutely for me.
Yeah. And they both look good in my hats.
They do look good in your hats. They love
perfect
those hats.
branding.
It's perfect. They really
brilliant
love those
branding.
hats.
That was
really fun.
But,
yeah,
mate, that's beautiful and amazing. Listen, thank you so much. It's been incredible.
Thanks for having me.
You're a legend, and that, as they say, is a wrap.